2 coaches got fired. Did you guys hear the news? DESHAUN Foster, after 3 games, has been nixed as UCLA's head coach. Virginia Tech, BRENT, after 3 games, has been nixed as their head coach after the total collapse that has happened against Old Dominion. We talked about this a little bit earlier, right? But let's get into a couple things. This dog is going crazy and it's driving me crazy. Firing coaches 3 games into the season, I'll never agree with in a lot of instances. But I think what we have to really think about as far as the BRENT situation and DESHAUN Foster, they were kind of in a DESHAUN Foster more than anything. We kind of should have seen the writing on the wall for him. But BRENT is the one that's very, very interesting. But just like anything, just like the transfer portal, just like the way that things have changed, you got to adapt to the times. And we've got coaches that are getting fired on the field and being sent on the Spirit Airlines flight moving forward, right? We got to adapt, and just like the transfer portal, we got to adapt and pull off the Band-Aid eventually, right? We can't continue on, especially in the way that college football is changing. Coaches need to change as well, right? In the way that they do things. With the way that a transfer portal is, where you have 2 transfer portal periods, you should be able to build your team up. I think what colleges are looking at is we're spending way too much money for dudes not to be able to turn our schools around, and you don't get the Kyle Whittinghams of the world and those guys out in Utah and the Kirk Ferentz up there in Iowa. You don't get those guys to stay for very, very long. But also those guys have, shout out to Kirk Ferentz for getting the most wins in Iowa football history this past weekend. So that was kind of cool to see that. But you don't get these type of coaches, right? And let's first start out with DESHAUN Foster, 5-10 record. It's such a short stint, right? 5-10. It almost reminds me of the Willie Taggart, coaching days at Florida State, where he just totally tanked us. He had a 5-10 record at UCLA, and we'll get into why this firing is kind of weird. He was 5-7 his first season, and he was 0-3 so far this season, which is the same thing with BRENT. There was a lot of high hopes for DESHAUN Foster. He had the history, not only being a player at the school, but being around the school, being, involved in some coaching aspect of the school ever since he had his stint in the NFL. After Chip left, and this is Chip Kelly, went off to go win a national championship with Ohio State. He came out and said, I don't like the recruiting aspect and doing all this stuff, so I'm going to just go be a coordinator. Now he's in the NFL. One of the things that, he had thought that he left him with a good team, and the team just went downhill from there. We were thinking that, DESHAUN Foster was going to be from a recruiting aspect, going to be able to bring a lot of those guys in, because he was kind of like the model coach, the model person to represent UCLA as a whole. And it didn't happen that way. From his first couple of press conferences, a lot of people just didn't think that DESHAUN Foster was the answer, by the way that he was just so, I guess, laid back, and kind of wasn't sure of himself, kind of didn't have the confidence from his first couple of press conferences. And I think that rubbed people the wrong way. And so when you look at all that in the culmination of how the team performed, how, you're losing against teams that you really shouldn't lose against, and then mishandling the Nico Iamaleava situation and sending Joey Aguilar out, and Tennessee fans are like, thank you. I see my man Ardell in there. Aguilar is a baller. He definitely appreciates the fact that they took on the better player, which we tried to tell you guys that, he was the better player all the way around, and I love the move by Joey Aguilar. But DESHAUN Foster, sorry, man. They had to send you on the way and send you packing. BRENT, on the other hand, 16-24 record, lost to Old Dominion this past weekend. Old Dominion, I think, was up by like 40 points before they even responded. And I didn't think that they were going to come back and actually be competitive in the game at all. Through 3 quarters, you're letting Old Dominion score 40 on you, right? And I like I said at the beginning of the show, I told my wife, I was like, I don't know if Brent Pry, if he gets fired, I wouldn't be surprised. And guess what? 45-26, put up a couple scores after going scoreless for 40 straight points to eventually meeting his demise as a coach, and also being 0-3 with all the talent that's on that squad, right? Let's get into a little bit of history about Brent Pry. Shout out to my man Desertron for joining as well. It looks like Too Evil has caught up. He was a hell of a defensive coordinator for Penn State, and for Georgia Southern and for Vanderbilt. Like, just go back through the history of what Brent Pry has done. The thing that makes this so interesting about his stint at Virginia Tech, and you would think the same thing about guys like Willie Taggart, right? Like, Florida State was his favorite school growing up. Brent Pry was actually a GA for Virginia Tech under Frank Beamer when he was the coach there back in the late 90s, I believe it was. And so there was a lot of hype for Brent Pry coming in and taking his team and trying to see if he can get Blacksburg back on the map as far as Virginia Tech is concerned. And he just couldn't get those guys together enough to live up to expectation of being Virginia Tech's coach. When you think about Virginia Tech, you think about athletic quarterbacks, which he has and had now with Kyron Drones. You think about good defenses, good defensive back units, which we haven't seen. So you have an athletic quarterback in a defense that just hasn't stepped up to the plate to be good. And so this really shows your true colors as a coach. You were supposed to bring both of these things back to the forefront. And especially being a defensive coordinator, we really didn't see any of the defensive prowess that we thought we would have at Virginia Tech. It should have been better with the talent that he's had over the years, right? Have had several wide receivers at this point drafted. Bashal Tuttons got drafted. Was one of the faster 40 times in the draft. Very happy that he's with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was in my top 5 running backs. And Kyron Drones, that just, you're sheltering that dude from how good that he actually could be. And you find yourself being absolutely fired as the coach of the Virginia Tech Hokies. Now, when I really pull back the layers, the question that we ask ourselves is, what coaches can fill in for Brent Pry? Who can be the next guys up? Not for Brent Pry, but for UCLA and Virginia Tech. What are the 2 coaches that come to mind for both of these schools? Well, let's go through UCLA first. And if you know me, I don't think that it's any mystery on why I picked Will Stein. I love Will Stein, man. The last 3 years that he has been at Oregon have been absolutely exciting to watch. He's gotten 2 Heisman candidate quarterbacks in Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, and it looks like he's about to have his 3rd. If you don't have Dante Moore on the top of your list, I don't know what we're doing. He's going to adapt well to being on the East, on the West Coast. Being in Oregon, he doesn't have to worry about the relocation situation moving across the country. And I would think this would be really cool for a team like Virginia Tech, too, to have a coach like him. He's from the East Coast. I mean, he played quarterback at Louisville. And so he has roots there, and I'm sure he would love to be back on the East Coast. But he's already built a pipeline being Oregon's offensive coordinator. 11 prospects have been signed through 2026 since he's been there that have all been from California. So California's been recruited heavy in his regards. A couple of quarterbacks, offensive linemen, tight ends, wide receivers. Since his stint's been there at Oregon, which is really nice that he has that, and now he can bring that back over if he was UCLA's coach. He's a creative, quarterback friendly, running back friendly, modern system where he's using a spread offense and running a lot of RPO schemes, and short dump is what he likes to do. And so a lot of people get involved in his offense, and people really, really like the way that he runs it. And if you watch the interviews on him, he just gives off the same energy that a Dan Lanning gives off too. No wonder why both of them are so successful, why they had the undefeated season, winning the Big Ten championship in the first year that Oregon was there. He's really, really good. He's a young, relatable coach and has just now had a stint under an SEC caliber coach in Dan Lanning. Remember, Dan Lanning was a defense coordinator for Georgia during one of those national championship runs. And so the pedigree for a guy like Will Stein, with all that in culmination of everything, he can build a roster at UCLA that could be very, very fun to watch. Like when Chip Kelly was there, if not better, with better quarterback play. And he's 36-6 in his offensive coordinating position for Oregon, which is something that you can hang your, you can put a feather in the cap for sure. All right, let's get over to Virginia Tech. We already made the case for Will Stein. Let's get over to Virginia Tech. If you know anything about the way that Houston has been playing, they've been playing phenomenal this season. 12-year coach and Willie Fritz. Yes, I said it. Willie Fritz would be an excellent coach to come over to Virginia Tech. 78-62 record, 3-1 in bowl games, brings a ton of experience. Blinn College. Blinn College is known for when Cam Newton came down there and won a national championship, but he's had some cojones there. Central Missouri, Sam Houston State, Georgia Southern, Tulane. Remember what he did with Tulane, put them back on the map. And now Houston. So he doesn't have any direct ties to Virginia Tech, but he does have a pipeline in the middle of the country and on the East Coast, right? So you have that working for you as far as Virginia Tech, because I think pipelines are important for us to consider. And no one is bigger than Texas, where he's at right now. So he can get a lot of those guys that are there to transfer over to Virginia Tech, and bam, you have a pretty good roster on your hands with Big 12 experience. He's been an amazing coach. He's had some amazing experience, and he uses the portal. He's not afraid of using the portal. He recruits well, and nothing can be said other than the fact that he gets 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀, who was a quarterback at Texas A&M, goes the incarnate word, does what he does, and then now is finding his stint back in the Power 5 with Dean Connors, who just transferred over from Rice. And he has an athletic quarterback and a very good running back that he's working with, and they're looking really, really good in his system. And the one thing about having so much experience that Willie Fritz has, and a lot of people say he's such a good dude, and all the rest of the things that you hear from good coaches, right, is he's going to seek out great coordinators. He understands that great coordinators with a ton of experience also matters to get your, unlike the younger guys, right? I think, when you have the younger coordinators that really haven't had a head coaching stint at like any smaller schools to try to find that talent, because you have to kind of be a coach talent evaluator too as a head coach, right? And I think it's one thing that gets overlooked. But Willie Fritz is going to make sure he's bringing the best of the best coordinators with them too, and they're going to make things happen. And so that's why the older coaches really bring some of the better talent as far as their, coordinators as well. But man, I think these two coaches would definitely put UCLA and Virginia Tech back on the map and make things interesting. And I've heard some other names thrown around there, but these are just kind of like my thoughts on paper. We've had two coaching firings, but UCLA and Virginia Tech, I think, could definitely turn their programs around if they go out and get, one of these coaches to come and bring the juice back to making these programs great again.